Hey guys, welcome to this session by Intellipaat. So in this session, we'll be learning the top interview questions for Microsoft Azure comprehensively. So before moving on with this session, please subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our upcoming videos. Now let's take a quick glance at the agenda. We'll start off with the basic Microsoft Azure questions like what is Azure and how does it compare to other cloud services like AWS and GCP. Moving ahead, we'll be looking into domain-specific or service-specific questions. We'll start off with storage services, where we'll look into questions on blob storage and table storage. Moving ahead, we'll be looking into questions on compute services, such as virtual machines and app services. And also we'll look into auto-scaling and traffic manager questions. Moving ahead, we'll be looking into networking services, where we look into questions about VNet and VNet peering. After that, we'll be looking into database services and also other domains clubbed together, and we'll be looking into 30 questions as a whole in this particular session. Also guys, if you want to take up an end-to-end session on Microsoft Azure, we at Intellipaat provide you a complete course, and those details are available in the description and you can go check it out. Now let's begin with this session.
First, let's look into what is Azure Cloud Service. So, what is Azure Cloud Service? Microsoft Azure is an ever-expanding set of cloud services to help your organization meet your business challenges. Azure offers services on a pay-as-you-go pricing model in computing, web services, data storage, analytics, etc. So there are so many different domains in which Azure is providing services. So to be very simple, Azure is a cloud provider, a public cloud provider, as well as you can get private cloud services and hybrid cloud services from them. So first of all, Azure is Microsoft owned. Azure is a cloud provider. So after AWS, Azure is the most popular cloud service in the world. So when an interview asks this, you can be basic as well as advanced. I would suggest you just give the apt answer what exactly it is. Microsoft Azure is a cloud service which provides you various different services in various domains like computing, web services, data storage, and you can access those services via an internet device. So you can access them through a laptop or a desktop or your mobile device, anything with an internet connectivity. You will be able to access Microsoft Azure. Okay, so we've seen what is Azure Cloud Service. Okay guys, now let's look into the second question, which is how does Azure compare with AWS? So first of all, AWS owns 32.3% of the market share in the public cloud industry, but Azure owns only 16.2%, which is just half of what AWS owns. But Azure is currently the fastest growing cloud network, and also it has 54 different regions in which it has availability zones, but AWS has 69 availability zones across only 24 regions. So regions in the sense are geographically located regions. For example, Azure has regions like South India, North India, East US, West US, Central US, Europe, Central Europe. So there are so many different regions like that. So like that, there are 24 different regions, but within those regions, AWS has 69 availability zones. But Azure has 54 regions. In 54 regions, it has 54 availability zones, and it's currently growing. So this basically shows Azure is better in availability zones, that is data centers, because it has a wide range of data centers in various regions. Next, comparing the services, if you already know about cloud, AWS and Azure, then this would be easy. EC2, S3, RDS are AWS services. The same exact service, EC2 is equal to virtual machine, Azure virtual machines. S3 is equal to storage, blob storage. RDS is equal to SQL databases in Azure. So EC2 is used to launch and create servers, same as VM does. And then S3 and blob storage are for storing objects. RDS and SQL databases can create relational databases running on the cloud. So you can distinguish between different services. And then finally, the pay per hour model and pay per minute model. So this is one of the important difference you'll have to note down, because AWS does not have a pay per minute model yet. It charges you for the hour which you used, but Azure will charge you only for the minute. For example, if you're running a service, let's say you're running the same server, Linux server in AWS and Azure for 5 minutes. In AWS, you will be charged the hour. For example, if the hour charged in both AWS and Azure is $5, so it would be $5 for 60 minutes. If it's $5, so you will be charged for the whole $5 in AWS, but in Azure that would be not the same, because you will be charged per minute. So if it is $5 for the hour, that is 60 minutes, so that will be reduced to 1 minute, so that would be multiplied into 5. So you will be charged very less in Azure compared to AWS if you are using services for a very less period of time. So if you're using some service for 2 to 10-15 minutes, then go with Azure, because that will not charge you as much as AWS. Okay, so we've seen the second question. So I think you can coagulate into an answer and give it. I'm just explaining you the differences, but you'll have to provide it more of a answer.
Okay guys, a quick info. Intellipaat provides an end-to-end training course on Microsoft Azure, and if you want to take it up, you can check those details in the description. Now let's continue with the session.
And then comes the roles implemented in Microsoft Azure. So there are three main roles: the web role, the worker role, and the virtual machine role. First, the web role. This gives a web solution, that is the front end. This is like an ASP.NET application, while under facilitating, Azure provides IIS, which is basically a web server, and required services. So web role provides a web solution. Basically, it's a front end. It can be a website's front end. The worker role is a solution for background service. It can run long activities. For example, if you have a log activity, if you want to monitor the log activity, you can use a worker role. And then finally, a virtual machine role. So this can act both as a web and a worker role, and this is executed by virtual machines. The virtual machine role gives the client the capacity to modify the virtual machine on which the web and worker roles are running. So for example, web role only contradicts to the website, the front end. Worker role only contradicts to the business logic, which is the background or the backend part. So in virtual machines, you can run both a web role and a worker role, which means you can have a website running as well as a background process running. So these are the three main roles which are implemented in Microsoft Azure. So I think you get the point of this. So basically in Azure, mostly it is used to launch applications. So for an application, obviously there will be a web role, which would be the application itself hosted, and then the worker role, which is background processes. For example, if a person wants to retrieve an image from the website, so they'll enter the information, click a button, and a background code will run. So that code would be your worker role, and these both can be run on a virtual machine, which makes it a virtual machine role. So these are the three most basic roles. And the next question is, so this might be a question which may be asked, but this does not have a certain answer. I'm just giving you the three most popular and commonly used services. So talk about the three principal segments of Microsoft Azure platform. Okay, so first of all, compute and storage comes by default because they are the most used. Compute services and storage services are the most used services in any cloud platform, and then you can choose one as per your need. For example, you can choose databases, or you can choose monitoring, managing, governance. You can choose anything. So here I've chosen databases. For example, you can tell the answer like this. So the principal segments of Microsoft Azure platform it can be basically anything, but here the most commonly used services comes under the compute and storage platform. And I also would say databases, because every single application needs a compute, needs storage, and also database. So for example, in compute there is virtual machines, app services, and function apps, which can be used to develop an application and also host that application with the backend code. And then there is Microsoft Azure Storage, where we have Blob Storage, table storage, where we have file storage, we have Azure Queues. So we can use all of them to store objects. We can use them to store images, videos, audio files. We can use them to store NoSQL data. And finally comes databases, where we can store, record, or structure information. And also there is a Cosmos DB, which is for NoSQL. And also if your application needs a analytical database, we have SQL data warehouses for that purpose too. So compute, storage, and databases, I would say they are the three principal segments of Microsoft Azure platform because they provide so many different services. Pretty sure even Azure uses them for their own benefit. Okay, so this is the fourth question. So we have seen 4 questions up till now. So the fifth question is, what is the distinction between Azure queues and Azure service bus queues? Okay, first of all, storage queues and service bus queues are different. So first, what are storage queues? Storage queues featuring a simple REST-based get, put, peek interface, providing reliable, persistent messaging system within and between services. Service bus queues are part of a broader Azure messaging infrastructure that supports queuing as well as publish or subscribe and more advanced integration patterns. Okay, so the simplest thing you'll have to know is if your application needs to store more than 80 GB of messages, go with storage queues. But if it needs only lesser than that and it won't exceed 80 GB, you can go with a service bus queue. So the thing is, storage queues are mainly used to move messages between services or to an end user. So you can see it is a REST based get, put, peek interface. Basically, you can get a message from it, you can upload or send a message through it. And in service bus, you can do the same, but also you can integrate advanced patterns. For example, you can integrate a queuing system which basically filters multiple messages according to their priority, and that does not come with storage queues. Also, storage queues are very easy to use. You can use it between services. You can create a queue within minutes. Service bus has a broader usage in Azure itself. So these are the main 2 differences, that if you want to use an application for your own personal use, go with storage queues. If it is a bigger application which needs shorter message storing, go with service bus queues. So the main distinction between them is storage queues are simple, REST-based get, put, peek interface, but service bus queues is involved with the Azure messaging infrastructure itself, and this supports queuing as well as normal publish and subscribe, which comes with storage queues as well. Also, you can integrate advanced integration patterns, which cannot be done in storage queues, where you can filter different messages according to their priority and various other features and factors. Okay, so the next question is, what is table storage in Microsoft Azure? So Azure Table Storage Service stores a lot of organized information. Azure tables are perfect for putting away organized non-relational data. It is a NoSQL data store which acknowledges verified calls from inside and outside the Azure cloud. So basically, table storage is a NoSQL data store where you can store non-relational data. That's basically NoSQL, non-relational database. Okay, so now what exactly is table storage? First, let's look into what exactly it is. First of all, a table is a collection of entities. A record can contain numerous tables. Basically, when you create a table, you can have multiple tables or a single table, and it is a collection of entities. So what are entities? Entities is an arrangement of properties like a database row. An entity can be up to 1 MB in size. So basically, an entity is an item within the table. For example, if it is a table for shoes, and inside that every single shoe name would be a entity. Next comes properties. A property is a name value pair. Every entity can incorporate up to 252 properties to store data. For example, let's say in entity we have 3 different shoe types. One is Adidas, one is Reebok, one is Nike, and inside Adidas you can have 252 properties like color, type, shoe model number, and so many different properties under that entity which defines that particular entity. So inside a table there can be any number of entities, and inside those entities there can be 252 different types of properties to store data. So that's what Azure Table Storage is used for. It is a service used to store a lot of organized information in which you can store non-relational data. It is a NoSQL data store which acknowledges verified calls from inside and outside the Azure cloud. That is, you can integrate it with Azure services inside the cloud as well as third-party services from outside the cloud. And table is a collection of entities. Entities is basically the main item inside a table, and properties are the basically a property explains what an entity is, and the entities completely explain what a table is. So that's it. That is what table storage is.
Okay guys, a quick info. Intellipaat provides an end-to-end training course on Microsoft Azure, and if you want to take it up, you can check those details in the description. Now let's continue with the session.
The next question is, what is autoscaling in Azure? So what is autoscaling in Azure? Scaling by including extra instances is frequently referred to as scaling out. So this is a commonly used term which is called scaling out. So Azure likewise supports scaling up by utilizing bigger role rather than more role instances. An auto-scaling solution reduces the amount of manual work engaged in dynamically scaling an application. So this is pretty simple, guys. So let's say you have a virtual machine which has let's say it has a website running on it. Now there are a lot of users using it right now, but that one particular virtual machine is able to handle them. So let's say there are 20 users. Now right now this particular virtual machine is able to handle all the 20 users and the website is not crashing. But suddenly your website has gone viral and there are 200 users. Now your virtual machine will not be able to handle because there are more users and the CPU utilization will go high, the traffic, the overload of your server will go high. Because of that, the usage also will increase and then your website might crash. So what you'll have to do, you'll have to again start up a virtual machine or another server. Once you've done that, you will have to configure your website and make it run again. So this will take some time. Until then, you would have lost a lot of users. So instead, you can start off with using auto scaling. So for example, you can see the image in the right corner below, in which to the left there are two virtual machines which is written as minimum 2. That basically means let's say you have a website and right now your website has two virtual machines and that is the minimum number of virtual machines and it will never go below that. Even a virtual machine is let's say even a virtual machine has been terminated accidentally, it will launch one more virtual machine within a span of a minute and that will be ready for your website. So now to the right side, you can see virtual machines as needed and maximum is equal to 5. So the maximum number of virtual machines you will get is 5. The minimum number of virtual machines running will be 2. And there you can add or subtract 3 virtual machines. For example, if you have 2 virtual machines right now, you can add 3 more or 2 more or 1 more, or you don't need to add at all. But you cannot go below number 2 or you cannot go above number 5. You can use auto scaling solution to do this. For example, right now you have 2 virtual machines and the work overload goes very high. So right now you want 1 virtual machine, so it will launch 1 virtual machine. Now it will monitor all of the 3 virtual machines. Again, if the user count is completely increasing, it will launch 1 more, and again if the users are increasing, the traffic is overloading, then again it will launch 1 more virtual machine. So here the maximum is number 5, so it will launch up to 5 virtual machines. After that, even though the user base is increasing, it won't go above that. You'll have to change that in the configuration. For example, max is equal to 10, so it can launch up to 10 different virtual machines. Okay, so got it? So I think you understood what exactly auto scaling is. So you can explain it simply. For example, you can tell auto scaling solution reduces the manual work engaged in dynamically scaling an application. Instead, we can set up an auto scaling solution in Azure where it gives you the number of required instances, as such as whenever the traffic increases, it will give you more instances. When the traffic decreases, it will reduce the number of resources being used, which is also cost optimized, and this will reduce your billing cost. So now let's look into the next question, which would be, what are the features of Microsoft Azure? So what are the features of Microsoft Azure? So there are so many different features. So let's just look into 3 features. So first, Azure App Services enables designers to assemble the sites utilizing various different programming languages. You can use ASP.NET, PHP, you can use Java, Python, and send these websites utilizing FTP or Git. Basically, you can use GitHub to have this code and you can integrate it with Azure App Services so that Azure itself will launch your website for you. It will maintain your website for you. You just have to work on your code. Next comes SQL Databases, formerly known as Azure Database, makes broadens and scales the application into the cloud utilizing Microsoft SQL Server. So in SQL databases provided by Azure, you don't need to scale out anything. For example, if you have set up a maximum size, whenever the size of the database increases, it will automatically scale the storage, and also you can manually scale the compute. And finally, this is Microsoft's platform as a service that supports multi-level applications and automated deployment. That is, Azure is Microsoft's platform as a service because they are giving you a platform to work on various different services. Even though services like virtual machines are infrastructure as a service, it comes under IaaS, but Microsoft Azure as a whole is a platform as a service because they are giving you a platform which you can work on different cloud services. So these are some features about Microsoft Azure. You can talk about them. So next question is, what are the difference between a public cloud and a private cloud? This is one of the most basic questions. You can easily answer them. So look at the image at the top. So first of all, public cloud, elasticity, utility pricing, leverage, expertise. And then private cloud, total control, regulation, flexibility. So let's compare this. First of all, elasticity. That is, you can launch any number of services. It can go up, it can go down. You can have any number of users. You can provide the access to users. You can cut off the access whenever you want. So it's more elastic. And then coming to right, it's total control. You can mention the administrator and only they will have control over the private cloud. So this basically increases security in private cloud, but public cloud is widely used. And also you can see leverage expertise. That means if you're using Microsoft Azure as a public cloud, then you will be able to leverage expertise because they have so many different security professionals working for Microsoft, and they will be guarding your virtual machines because you have taken a virtual machine from Azure itself. And coming to private cloud, you'll have to maintain, monitor all of that. And then comes utility pricing and regulation. So utility pricing in the sense you only pay for what you use. In private cloud, you will pay for everything you have taken up. And also regulation in the sense you can stop someone to access something. You can stop a service overall. You don't need to use a service. So in private cloud, you have the whole control. In public cloud, you have partial control. Okay, so now let's look into the most basics of them. A public cloud is utilized as a service through the internet by users, so anyone can use it, while a private cloud is deployed within specific limits like firewall settings and is totally overseen and checked by users dealing with it in an organization. So a public cloud is used for launching applications for public use, that is end user use. Private cloud is mostly used for deploying applications within a specified limit. For example, within an organization, you can launch applications. So you can do that using private cloud. So this is the basic differences between public and private cloud. So the next question would be hybrid cloud. What do you comprehend about hybrid cloud? So basically a company can use both public and private cloud. So a combination of them is a hybrid cloud. So hybrid cloud is a blend of internal and external cloud services. So internal in the sense within the organization, external in the sense for users, a mix of private cloud joined with the utilization of public cloud services. This kind of cloud is most appropriate when you need to keep the classified information at your vicinity, private cloud, and consume alternate services from a public cloud. For example, if you have mission critical data, you can store that in the private cloud, and the application itself can be running on the public cloud because the application does not have any important information, and even though there is a security breach, there can be nothing taken from that, but your mission critical data and code is stored in a private cloud which only you can access. So this is hybrid cloud. And the next question is, what is a storage key? So your storage key access keys are similar to a root password for your storage account. Always be careful to protect your access keys. Use Azure Key Vault to manage and rotate your keys securely. You can view and copy your account access keys with the Azure Portal, PowerShell, or Azure CLI. The Azure Portal also provides a connection string for your storage account that you can copy. For example, if you're logging into your storage account in Azure Portal, it's pretty simple to log in. You can just enter as such. But if you're trying to access your storage account from PowerShell or Azure CLI, you will have to use your storage keys. So it's basically an entry point for your storage account. So you can use that. Also, Azure Portal provides a connection string for your storage account that you can copy and use it in your Azure CLI or PowerShell. So to be simple, it is similar to a root password for your storage account, and it is a key which you can use to log in into your storage account to check out the storage containers like blob storage, table storage within the storage account itself. So it's pretty simple, storage account. And then comes what is Microsoft Azure Traffic Manager. So it enables users to control the distribution of user traffic of installed Azure cloud services. There are three distinctive load balancing strategies provided by Azure. The manager who uses on traffic applies a routing policy to the domain name service, questions on your domain names, and maps the DNS courses to the apt instances of your application. So let me explain to you in simple words. So first of all, Azure Traffic Manager is a DNS based traffic load balancer that enables you to distribute traffic optimally to services across global Azure regions while providing high availability and responsiveness. So basically, Traffic Manager uses a DNS to direct client requests to the most appropriate endpoint on traffic routing method. So basically, let me explain to you this. So let's say you are trying to access a website using a website's URL name. Now when you type that, your first point of entry would be the Traffic Manager. So once you hit that, the Traffic Manager will use DNS and it will check to which IP address should this particular URL name should be redirected. So when it finds that, it will redirect the client request to the most appropriate service. For example, in Intellipaat.com, we have Intellipaat.com, which is the main page, and Intellipaat.com/blog. So for example, I'm searching for Intellipaat.com/blog. Now this will go to the Traffic Manager. Once it hits the Traffic Manager, it will check out the IP address for this particular URL. Once it gets the IP addresses, it will transfer me to the blog page, not the main Intellipaat.com page. So that's what Traffic Manager does, and it's pretty simple to use it. So you can start off with Traffic Manager even now. So you can combine Traffic Manager with auto scaling so that it is better to use. So if you're using Traffic Manager with auto scaling, basically what you do, you will be able to launch and terminate multiple virtual machines, as well as you'll be able to launch multiple applications in different virtual machines and connect two auto scaling groups together, in which the Traffic Manager is the first entry point. And for example, in one auto scaling group there is app 1, in another auto scaling group there is app 2. So now it hits the Traffic Manager. If you're trying to access app 2, it will take you to app 2. If you're trying to access app 1, it will take you to the app 1 auto scaling group. So this is how you can use Traffic Manager. The next question is, what is Microsoft Azure Portal? This is again a basic question. So Microsoft Azure Portal is the website which you are logging into when you're using Azure. So view and manage all of your applications in one unified hub. You can view your web applications, your databases, your virtual machines, your network, storage, and VST projects. Now it is easy to keep tabs on current and projected costs. So Microsoft Azure is not just for managing all your applications and services. It can also be used to manage your current and projected billing costs. So Azure Portal automatically calculates your existing charges, as well as it will forecast your future or monthly charge, even if you're managing hundreds of resources across several applications. For example, if you're using only one service, still it will give you the billed amount for right now and also the projected bill. If you're also using hundreds of services, again it will do the same thing for you regardless of the scale. So Microsoft Azure Portal is the website which you're using to access Microsoft Azure services. That is more than enough. If you want to tell more, you can tell it's a unified hub to manage all the Azure services. It also provides cost management services. You can say it has a different web page for every single service. You can access every single service directly from the portal itself, and also manage, monitor, and do everything else through Azure Portal itself. And also you can access Azure Portal from any internet connected device. Okay, so we've seen that. The next question is, what is Elastic Pool in SQL Azure? So we already saw what exactly is an SQL database. So now Azure SQL Database Elastic Pools or a simple cost-effective solution for managing and scaling multiple databases that have varying and unpredictable usage demands. Databases in an elastic pool or on a single server and share a set of resources at a set price. Okay, let me make it simple for you. So right now you want various databases for different applications, and all these databases need to have a different set of specifications. Now what you can do is you can launch an elastic pool, which is basically a single server with different sets of resources within it. You can launch multiple databases and you can specify the required set of resources for a particular database within the elastic pool itself. You can launch any number of databases within that server and how much that server can handle, and all of the databases is shared, will use shared resources, and the price for that will be the same even though you're using any number of databases. So let's say you can have 10 databases within that elastic pool, or you can have 5 databases, or you can have only one database, but you'll be charged the same because you are sharing the same number of resources across all the databases. So this is elastic pool.
Okay guys, a quick info. Intellipaat provides an end-to-end training course on Microsoft Azure, and if you want to take it up, you can check those details in the description. Now let's continue with the session.
Next is, what is Azure SQL Database? So an SQL database is just an approach to get associated with cloud services where you can store your database into the cloud. If you already know about SQL databases, for example, MySQL, PostgreSQL or MS SQL database, you will understand this easily because it is basically the same relational database on your local system hosted on a cloud system and given remote access to you. So you can tell it pretty simply. SQL Azure Database is a database server running in the Azure data center and to which you are given remote access to so that you can access that SQL database. Microsoft SQL Azure has a similar component of SQL Server, that is, it provides high accessibility, versatility and security in the core. Microsoft Azure SQL Database has an element, it makes backups of each active database automatically. So this feature does not come with a local database because it does not take backup. It has only one storage where the data is actually stored, and if that is lost, your data is lost. But in Microsoft Azure SQL databases, it's not the case. You can enable automatic database backups. So if your database is active and new data is coming in, it will automatically back it up. So even though your database has been terminated, you can use the backup to launch a database with the same existing data set. So this is Azure SQL databases. Now let's look into the next question, which is, what are the different types of storage areas in Microsoft Azure? So there is blobs, there is table storage, there is queues, and there are still more, but you can talk about 3 maximum. So there is also file storage, which is basically a shared access file storage. So you can also talk about that if you want. But right now we'll be looking into blob, table and queues. So queues we already looked into. Now we'll just look into blobs and tables. Even table storage was a separate question, so you can also answer that. So first of all, what is blob? So blob is the most commonly used storage type in Azure. So the full form of blob would be binary large objects. So you can see that BLOB, which is basically binary large objects, blobs. So blobs are a component for storing a lot of content or binary data. You can store pictures, audio, visual documents, you can store video, you can store any type of data. They can scale up to 200 terabytes and can be acquired by utilizing REST APIs. Very simple to start off with blob storage. You can create a storage account and create a blob container in which you can upload images, videos, documents, anything you want. You can store any type of binary data within blob storage. So that is one of the main area in Microsoft Azure. Next comes table storage, which is a non-relational data store where you can store organized information, and also you can store them using a format which is table, entity, and within entity you can have properties. So that we saw. Next is queue. The sole target of a queue is to empower communication among the web and worker role instances. They help in storing messages that may be accessed by a customer. So as told, queues can be used to connect multiple services as well as services with the end user. So these are the three main storage areas. One more is a file storage, which is basically a shared storage access which you can use to connect the same storage to multiple virtual machines. So every single user in every single virtual machine will be able to access the same data store, which will save you a lot of storage as well as cost. Next question is, what is the concept of blob storage? I explained to you what exactly is blob. So let me just go into that more. So blob, as told again, it is binary large objects and includes text files, images, audios, and videos. Azure Blob is a service that stores massive unstructured data that can be accessed from any place via protocols like HTTP or HTTPS. So how does this work? How can you access these objects using HTTP or HTTPS? So it's pretty simple. Whenever you upload an object like image or audio into the blob storage, it will have a URL. So it will be provided a URL and you can use that URL to access that particular object. For example, if I'm uploading an image, that image will have a URL for that image itself. Now you can use that URL to access that particular image. So how will you access that? Using protocols like HTTP or HTTPS. So now what else you can use Azure Blobs for? Storing data for disaster recovery, backup and archiving, also storing files for shared access. Shared access in the sense, if you upload an object and you have a link for it, you can share that link with multiple users so that they all can use that particular blob storage as a shared storage. So that can happen. Also, you can use it for disaster recovery. That is, you can store data in different regions in blob storage itself and use it for backup and then also archiving data. So this is blob storage. Now let's look into the next question. So now this question is, what is Azure DevOps in Microsoft Azure? So if you are already familiar with DevOps methodologies, then this would be easier to understand. If you're not, I'll explain to you what exactly is DevOps in a few sentences. So first of all, DevOps is not a tool. It is a methodology which companies follow and implement in their software development lifecycle to automate the entire lifecycle. So Azure DevOps is not a methodology, it is a service. You may be confused by the name, but DevOps is the methodology, but Azure DevOps is a DevOps service provided by Azure and it is developed by the Microsoft team. It was previously called as VSTS or Visual Studio Team Services. Azure DevOps provides easy automation by having predefined build options for the deployment of applications. For example, if you're trying to launch an Angular application, it already has build options for it. It has npm packages in build. You can have a build. You can basically create a build in a matter of minutes. For example, if you're also launching a Java application, it has a Maven build option. You can use that to build that application. So that's why they are saying it provides you easy automation and also predefined build options. And finally, it also monitors your tools and it uses monitoring tools to monitor your application or your project which you have launched within Microsoft Azure DevOps. Okay, so Azure DevOps has various different tools. So let me explain to you those tools. So one tool is Azure Repos, which is a repository like GitHub. So it's pretty similar. It's basically the same. And then comes Azure Pipelines. Pipelines is the tool which you use to implement a CI/CD pipeline. A CI/CD pipeline is the one which you use to automate the software lifecycle. And then comes test plans, which is basically used to test the application. And then comes Azure boards, which is a Kanban board, which is basically like Jira, where you can implement work items, you can implement sprints. And then finally you have Azure artifacts, where you can store the packages like npm NuGet in the same place so that it is easier to access them. Also, finally, you get an Azure dashboard where you can access and also create and launch widgets which will be helpful for your application. For example, you can see how many builds have been succeeded, how many have failed, how much time it is taking to build a particular project, how many times it has been deployed, and how many users are using our application right now. So all these widgets can be used in Azure DevOps. So you've seen that. The next question is, what is Azure App Service? We already discussed this, but still I'll explain it to you once again. So to be very simple, Azure App Service is a completely a managed service provided by Microsoft Azure. So within Azure, Azure App Service is a completely managed platform as a service, not infrastructure as a service, but a PaaS. It is a PaaS offering for proficient developers that conveys a rich arrangement of abilities to web, mobile, and integration services. So if a developer wants to just concentrate on the code which he is developing and doesn't want to manage the servers and the other side of it, that is the backend part of it, so what he can do, he can opt for a Azure App Service where he can launch one and he can just upload his code into Azure App Service, which will take care of provisioning servers, uploading the code within the server, and also serving that website, and also provide you an URL which you can use to look into the website. So you can do all of this using Azure App Service and you don't need to manage anything. Azure will manage everything for you. It will as told, it will launch servers, it will also monitor and manage them for you. And if you want anything else, if you want to scale it up, again you have an option for that. If you want to look into the server which it has launched, again you have a shell option for that. Mobile applications in Azure App Service offer a very adaptable, universally accessible mobile application development platform for enterprise developers and system integrators that conveys a rich set of capacities to mobile engineers. So basically, using Azure App Services, you can not just launch websites, you can also launch mobile applications, and they are very adaptable and universally accessible mobile application development platform. For example, you might be using Android Studio or Xcode. So in this, you will be able to launch both of them and they will run successfully. So next we'll look into CMD let in Azure. So it's a pretty simple answer. So CMD let is a command, basically it's a PowerShell command, and this is utilized as a part of the PowerShell environment. So CMD lets, command lets are summoned by the Windows PowerShell to automate the scripts which are in the command line. For example, you have created a script, now you want to automate the script, you can go with command let. Windows PowerShell runtime additionally invokes them automatically through Windows PowerShell APIs. You can also automate CMD let commands which will automate other scripts using PowerShell APIs. So to be pretty simple, CMD let is a lightweight command which you can use in the PowerShell environment, and it is used to automate scripts. For example, if you want to launch virtual machine at a particular time, or if you want to monitor a virtual machine at 5 p.m. in the evening every single day, you can launch that script and you can automate it using CMD let, and it will run that script every day at 5 p.m. Okay, so the next one is Microsoft Azure Scheduler. So Azure Scheduler enables you to invoke activities, for example, calling HTTPS endpoints or presenting a message on a storage queue on any schedule. With Scheduler, you make jobs in the cloud that dependably call services both inside and outside of Azure and execute jobs on demand on a routinely repeating schedule or assign them for a future date. So in the name itself, you can understand Microsoft Azure Scheduler. So it basically schedules certain things for you. But what does it schedule? It schedules jobs on the cloud. So it can be within Azure or outside of Azure, and as mentioned, it will execute those jobs on demand, and it can be done on a repeating scale, that is, for example, every day or every week, or you can assign them for a future date to run only once. So that you can do using Microsoft Azure Scheduler. For example, it can call an HTTPS endpoints, or it can present a message on a storage queue on any schedule. So you can use the scheduler for any service on Azure or outside of Azure. So it's pretty simple. It is explainable by name itself. So to be simpler, you can tell this Microsoft Azure Scheduler is a service which you can use to schedule a certain task in Microsoft Azure or outside of Microsoft Azure to execute a job on demand, which can be executed repeatedly, or it can be set to a future date for execution only once. So the next question is, how can you create an HDInsight Cluster in Azure? So let me explain it to you in a very simple way. So you can tell this because this is an interview, you will be asked questions, you will be able to answer them with words. So to make an HDInsight cluster, first of all, you'll have to open Azure Portal. Then click on new, you can select data services and you can click on HDInsight, or you can just search HDInsight and get into it. So once you get into it, you will have multiple options. You will have Hadoop, you will have HBase and Storm and more options as well. So Hadoop is the default and native execution of our Apache Hadoop, and HDInsight provides you Hadoop as the default option. And then comes HBase, which is an Apache open source NoSQL database based on Hadoop that gives random access and solid consistency for a lot of unstructured data. Storm, as such, it is a distributed fault-tolerant open source computation system that enables you to process data in real time. So the thing is, I'm not going to explain Hadoop, HBase and Storm right now. I'm just going to explain to you what is HDInsight. So HDInsight is an analytics service which you can use to launch Hadoop on the Azure cloud or other Hadoop ecosystem services like HBase, Storm or Spark on Azure cloud. So to launch HDInsights, it's pretty simple, but to work with it, it is a little tough. So to launch HDInsight, you'll just have to go to the HDInsight cluster and you can choose the service which you want and you can launch it. So HDInsight, again, it's an analytics service and you can launch the big data or analytics service which you want from it. Next question is, what is Text Analytics API in Azure Machine? So let me put it simply. First of all, Text Analytics APIs comes under cognitive services. So API, the application program interface. So this particular API is for text analytics, which can be used to search a particular word, or it can be used for keyword mining. Okay, now let us just read this once. The API can be used or utilized to analyze unstructured content for tasks such as sentiment analysis and key phrase extraction. Sentiment analysis in the sense, let's say you have a complete page of content. Now you want to see the sentiment of that content, whether the statement is happy or sad or neutral. So you can check out that using various keys and you can enter those words into the API so that when it runs, it will check whether it is positive or negative. So you can see it has a numeric score between 0 and 1, and when it comes near 1, it is highly positive, and when it comes near 0, it is highly negative sentiment. So that you can see. This is for sentiment analysis. And key phrase extraction in the sense, if you have a very huge document and if you want to check whether this particular key phrase comes inside it, and you can use the Text Analytics API to check out the entire document. The upside of this API is that another new model need not be planned and prepared. The user just needs to bring the data and call the service to get the sentiment results. So they are telling that the best part of this API is that you don't need to call another service to run this API. Instead, you just have to bring the data set and call this API to run on the data set and get the sentiment results immediately. So I think you got it. It is a text analytics API mainly used for tasks like sentiment analysis and key phrase extraction. You have two numeric scores, 0 and 1. Near 0 it is negative and near 1 it is highly positive. It's basically sentiment, and the upside is you don't need to call any other service. You can directly call this API and upload a dataset and it will give you the sentiment results. Next question is, what is migrate tool? So again, in the name itself you can get this answer. Migration, a migration from the on-premise setup to the cloud or from the cloud to the on-premise setup. This is a central hub of tools to discover, access and migrate workloads to Azure. So you can migrate any type of workload into Azure. So it provides support for key migration scenarios across servers, data, databases, web applications and virtual desktops. It saves costs and migrate efficiently with free tooling and Azure cost optimization. So you can use the Azure Migrate tool to migrate databases or servers or web applications from your on-premise setup to the Azure cloud seamlessly. So for example, if you want to migrate your database, you will have to provide the details like the endpoint, then you'll have to provide the username and password, and then the destination would be Azure database. You can provide the details of the Azure database, and once you click start, it will migrate the data from the on-premise database into the Azure database, and it's very simple to start with. So this is basically Azure Migrate tool. You can easily explain this with 2 or 3 sentences. And we've come to the final question, which is what is Azure Service Level Agreement? First of all, the SLA ensures that when you send 2 or more role instances for each role, access to your cloud service will be maintained not less than 99.9% of the time. Additionally, identification and recorrection activities will be started 99.9% of the time when a roles instance procedure isn't running. So let me explain to you SLA in simple words. It's an agreement in which Azure tells you that this particular service will be running for this amount of time. So for example, if you are using a service for 10 minutes, Azure provides you a SLA stating that your application will run 99.9% of the time in that 10-minute period. So your application can go down only for a 0.01%. That's very less. So like that, Azure will provide you. If you are using a free trial service, they don't mention an SLA because it's your free trial and they don't give you any benefit for you. But if you have a paid Azure account, if you're paying every single month, they will provide you an SLA for every single service, which will mention that this particular service will run for this amount of time. So for storage, it's basically high. For example, it would be 99.9999% of the time. It will be always up. It will never go down. So SLA is a statement which tells you this particular service will stay up for this amount of time and it will not go down. For example, if you're using it for 1 hour, it will stay up for 99% of the time and it may go for 1% of the time. It's not that it will go, it may go. So this is Azure SLAs. So we've come to the last question of this session, guys. I hope you understood all of the questions which we've taught.
Okay guys, a quick info. Intellipaat provides an end-to-end training course on Microsoft Azure, and if you want to take it up, you can check those details in the description. Okay guys, we've come to the end of this session and I hope this session was helpful and informative for you. If you have a doubt, please leave a comment below and we'll love to help you out. Thank you.